Build Your Own BPOS course. Hopefully, since the last lesson, or the last few that have covered a handful of discount and promotions related topics, you've been able to add and test out some manual discounts and product promotions in your database. This lesson is going to shift gears quite a bit to a topic that we haven't really discussed yet in this course, our back-office data admin. Essentially, this lesson will act as an introduction to our back-office reports. Then a little later on in this course, we will get into some specific reports and data analysis options in detail. But for today, we'll mostly focus on some generalities as well as exploring exactly what a report is, and you'll also discover that we have many consistent controls and UI elements that flow throughout the application. We can use these controls in many ways to both speed up admin, and they also form the basis of what we can call our reporting engine. By the end of this lesson, while you may not know the ins and outs of every single back office report just yet, you should be able to navigate through our report menus to find what you're looking for and understand how to create and save what are called custom views, how to apply filters, etc., all of which can be done in multiple areas of back office to completely tailor your own BPOS experience. After all, you are building your own BPOS here. So the first thing we should chat about then is just to clear up what exactly our back office reports can do, and what they cannot do, for that matter. Because there are other tools out there that are a lot more powerful, quite frankly, for robust data analysis. Things like business intelligence, also known as BI, and then there's big data, which takes BI a step further even. So the intention of this lesson isn't to talk about BI and big data, it's simply to make it clear that our reports are still very, very good for their intended purposes and what they can do, but will not be as full-bodied, so to speak, as something like Microsoft's Power BI tool. Something like Power BI or Infragistics, which are two of the most common BI tools on the market, can be used to achieve things that we simply cannot, but that's what those are designed for. In fact, Microsoft state that, and this is a quote, "BI is the collection of visuals to tell the story graphically, such as charts and graphs, along with features to interact with the end user." Whereas a report can be defined as, and this is another quote, this is a detailed dictionary definition, a detailed summary of the large data set as per the criteria given by the user. So that's for a report. So based on those descriptions, we can think of reports and what we have available to us in back office as sort of the bare bones spreadsheet style where lots of information and data sets can be summarized succinctly. And as you'll come to see, we do have quite a few ways that we can customize exactly how that information can be viewed. We also have the ability to filter the report data once we've generated the report. Now, these powerful BI and big data tools, on the other hand, can also incorporate full-fledged arrays of charts and graphs and provide interactive analytical and forecast tools. And it is important to note that we can combine data from BPOS with some of those tools by actually exporting BPOS reports and essentially pumping that data into something like Power BI or Infragistics. Being able to pump BPOS data somewhere else lets us then utilize those external tools to analyze the data. So our report data can be exported in a number of formats, and then the files can be used elsewhere with other richer analysis solutions outside of BPOS. But like I said, all of that is not to say that we don't have some great reporting capabilities right at our fingertips from within back office, and that is what we will be looking at today in this lesson. And then getting into detail in some upcoming lessons when we focus on more specific reports and specific report types. We do also have some other external reporting options available from BPOS. We can email reports, we can access saved reports via the web, and we can use our Snapshots app, which are all BPOS core features. Now, some of those that I've just mentioned we will touch on throughout this course, but some of them are simply outside of the scope of this course, so we won't be. But anyway, for now, before we even get into BackOffice and start looking around, while we're thinking about the different ways that data can be used in these applications, it's important to highlight the importance of good data. After all, the reports that we have available to us are first and foremost only as good as the data they contain. Second to that then is the ability to analyze and utilize that data. Even with great data available, it can be challenging to turn it into valuable information and insight. And with bad data, well, we might as well, not even waste our time really. Bad data is going to lead to bad analysis, that's going to lead to misinformation, and pretty much zero useful insight. So simply by starting with good quality data, we'll be in a better position to analyze and use that data to our advantage than if we were to start with poor quality data. So in doing a bit of research on data quality, when I first did this session a couple years ago, I came across a blog post explaining these 7 dimensions of quality data, or 7 dimensions of data quality, I should say, and I thought I would share them. We've got accuracy, completeness, consistency, conformity, uniqueness, integrity, and timeliness. I won't read each of these descriptions out, but feel free to pause the video here if you'd like to, and have a read of this yourself if you're interested in this type of thing. And the link to this blog post is included at the bottom of the slide here also. But basically the 7 dimensions work synergistically together just to determine the quality of our data and basically whether or not the data that we have is even worth analyzing and using to gather any insights from to begin with. In relation to those 7 dimensions of data quality, there are a number of ways that data quality can suffer, but the 2 major categories are human error and systems challenges. Human error, it's inevitable. That could be anything from just an extra 0 where it doesn't belong, to someone misunderstanding how product base and reordering sizes need to be built in BackOffice, to too many people with access to the database. These things can all have a negative effect on data. They're all human error. Systems challenges, on the other hand, can be avoided with proper planning and execution. Since we can identify systems challenges prior to them occurring, we should be able to actively implement processes to keep them in check basically, and when we do come across them, sort of strategize and change course accordingly. So knowing that both of these things exist, human error and systems challenges, and that they can cause poor data, what can we do about it? So human error, obviously it's going to happen whether we like it or not, but there are actions that we can take to mitigate the significance of these errors. Probably the best we can do to avoid them is to double and triple check entries for things like stock takes, media counts, product sizes, etc., and try to ensure that anyone in charge of system maintenance really just fully understands what they're doing when they're doing things like adding product records to the database, for example, or editing a supplier record or creating a purchase order or something like that. Also, on the human error front, there can be issues with conformity, issues with completeness, issues with uniqueness or duplicate records. That's another argument for the use of operator restrictions and only granting certain individuals some operator privileges. We come back to this idea and concept of operator privileges again and again. But the fewer individuals with access to maintaining the database, the better chance that conformity adherence shouldn't be a problem, and that duplicates should be kept to a minimum. That's all probably a pretty good segue to get into BackOffice and to revisit some operator privileges that we've looked at previously. Cool, so I've got Sammy, one of our senior managers here. I've got their operator record open, and so obviously to control who has access to maintaining certain database records, all the applicable operational and system setup privilege flags will need to be set or not set in the case here. Obviously, as mentioned before, it just does depend on the operator's role within the business. Now I've just randomly picked Sammy here and they happen to not have many privileges turned on, so just keep those sorts of things in mind. Now also, if we head to the maintenance tab, where you'll recall we can grant or restrict access to all of these components from products to accounts and memberships. Of course, on stock control, all of this is closely tied to data in the database as well, and potentially marketing and promotions also. But given that the focus of the rest of this lesson is reports and reporting, we should certainly take a closer look at the flags that we have on this tab. Just to reiterate, by the way, we won't be getting into the specifics of any individual reports in this lesson, but it is still helpful to know which flags control what in regards to reports for now. So the sales report section obviously houses those flags, but it is not a one-to-one relationship with the sales reports menu that's over here. And all of these flags do control access to multiple reports. So allow cash reports is going to control access to those that are classified as cash reports, but that does include reports like the till balance, till summaries, and operator summaries, to name a few. Then we've got allow product reports, so that controls access to reports such as product summaries and the transaction journal. I will show you where to find all of these reports in a minute, by the way. Allow accounts reports is going to control access to account-related reports. Allow transaction reports, obviously going to be related to the transaction report, so the transaction journal, and we'll go over a couple of the transaction reports in a few minutes, and then in an upcoming lesson later on in this course, we will go through our transaction reports in a bit more detail. The allow stock reports, that's going to cover things like the stock journal, the stock on hand report, and stock purchases, for example. And then we've got allow marketing reports, that is going to control access to those which are on their own in this sub-menu here, labeled as marketing reports. Cool. Then we've got the other reports section, and some of these flags are one-to-one with specific reports in the other reports sub-menu. However, some of them, like allow analysis reports, do cover multiple reports. So for example, for that one, we have a sub-menu called analysis reports, which by the way, that's available as an add-on analysis pack to BPOS Core. But yeah, also within this section is where we can find the flag for granting access to maintain saved reports, which is a very, very useful tool for operators who will be running the same report time and time again that they may want filtered or configured a certain way. We will explain more about saved reports and how to save reports in another lesson, but essentially it gives us the ability to more quickly access a report over and over and over again that we have configured to some exact specifications without needing to reset those specs each time. Then we've got this little global report section, only a couple flags here, but these are directly tied to our saved reports, because while each individual can have their own saved reports, the global reports are a special type of saved reports that will be available to all users that have access to global reports. So we can control separately who can see and access global reports and the global reports list, and who can actually save new reports to it. So who can save global reports that will be available to others that have access to global reports. Then the last section on this tab contains all the flags related to what are called report views. You'll see what exactly these are later in this lesson, but essentially each report has a collection of data sets, and we can configure the views of each report to determine exactly which information from those data sets we want to see and which we don't. So using these flags, we can control exactly who can do what regarding views. Who can add new views to a report, who can edit them, who can delete them, and so on. And this, I should mention this maintain my views only flag. This is a restrictive one. It will make it so that an operator who can add views can only edit and delete the views that either they've created or that are owned by their immediate parent group. What I mean by owned, if we look at the drop down below, and we'll see this when we maintain views later, each view can essentially be filtered to control who will be allowed access to it. That can be set to all operators, mine only, my parent group, or my parent's parent group. So that will just be the default whenever this particular operator creates a new view, but those can be changed manually per view, by the way. As always, just make sure that the operator that you're logged in as has the correct access so that you can view reports, maintain saved reports, and maintain views. All the things that you'll need to do following this lesson, or if you're following along. The operator that I'm logged in as does have everything available. Of course, as we know, not all operators should have access to all things in BackOffice, including all reports. Some probably shouldn't have access to any, so there could be some operators that do need access to do certain things in BackOffice, but maybe shouldn't actually have access to any reports, while others may require access to some reports but not others. And sure, there will be some people within the organization that should have access to everything. But anyway, with all those covered, let's actually take a closer look at our reports and see what is where. For starters, I should explain the difference between what are considered to be transaction reports and what are summary reports. So transaction reports are those that contain data which is directly related to transactions. Those don't have to be sales transactions, by the way, so stock control activities are considered to be transactions too. So transaction reports, they allow us to review and analyze transactions that have occurred during a specified reporting period. Some examples of these would be, if I take a look at the stock reports menu, the stock journal would be one. Cool, and here we have some information about saved reports telling us pretty much what I mentioned a couple minutes ago, that if we would like to use this report often, we can click Save Report, which is the option, this button at the top, once we've configured the report as we like it. But like I said, we'll go over that in depth in an upcoming lesson. Cool, but we can see that this stock journal report, which as I said is a transaction report, allows us to report on all sorts of specific stock control activities and options here. If we look at the sales report menu, there's a transaction report in here that I mentioned earlier. It is literally called the transaction journal, which is going to be able to show us every single transaction that's occurred at the tills. That's going to include sales activities, returns, no sales, table activities, and so on. Very useful to be able to track down individual actions that have taken place and be able to see all sorts of details, including the operator responsible, so which operator was logged in at the till when this activity occurred, products and their quantities, payment totals, etc. We do have a few other transaction reports scattered around, a couple other common ones that I'll mention. If we head to the other reports menu, we have the table report and the audit report. We will get into audits and alerts in detail in another lesson, but just to summarize, the audit report is extremely useful from a security perspective by showing us exact dates and times that specific audit types and alerts have been triggered in the system. So we'll cover that in detail in another lesson, but that's probably enough of an overview of transaction reports for now. Our summary reports, which are the other type of report we have, you might have noticed as I was clicking around there, they are going to summarize data for specific purposes. They each, of course, have a different purpose. So for example, if I go back to the stock reports menu, we have one here called Stock Summaries Report. So what this is going to do is it's going to collate data for whichever period we've specified that we want to be reporting on, and it's going to give it to us in a summary. In other words, rather than show us specific stock transactions like receipts or transfers, it's going to show us the total amounts of receipts or transfers for the given period, maybe for a week or maybe for a month or something like that, rather than show us exact receipts and transfers that have occurred. Or if we go to the sales report menu, we have a lot of summary reports here. We can view summary reports for tills, for operators, for products, for accounts, meaning that if there's a specific item or database record that we want to report on for a certain time frame, we can do so. For example, we can use the operator summaries report to see a summary of an operator's sales, or maybe a group of operator sales. Maybe we would leave that the display period as the current shift, but maybe we'd want to see them summarized for a different period, and we'll get into these options very shortly, by the way. But yeah, similar idea for the product summaries and account summaries reports, but from the perspective of their respective categories and related information for those, rather than for operators. Another very common and useful summary report is going to be if I scroll up here, the period summary report. This, if I display, is going to combine a lot of summary data into this one sort of comprehensive report. So we've got some select important stock summary data. If we had any data, obviously I don't in this database. I haven't done anything for the current shift, and even if I change this, I'll just go to all time and display that. There's not much going on in here, some sales that I've pushed through and some demonstrations. But regardless, yeah, we can see here we've got some select stock summary data, some sales data, some banking summary, some accounts data over here if we had any accounts, discounts, and some product data here as well. We can see our type grouped sales, all in this one handy report. Cool, and one final summary report that I'll point out for now is going to be our sales report creator, which we can use to combine various things to configure a very personalized report. So how this one works is we would start with one of these report types, and we can then apply some filters and options to tailor to our exact reporting needs. But yeah, that will have to do for our reports overview for now. Like I said, we will go through quite a few of these in detail in some upcoming lessons. But as you can see, these are organized quite intuitively in their submenus on the side here for us to navigate through and to find what we need. What we'll spend most of the rest of this lesson on are the report controls and configuration options that you may have noticed. I sort of pointed some of them out there as we were looking at some of those reports, or even that you would have seen on things like the operator list and the product list, because believe it or not, those are reports too, just a little bit different type of report than what we've been looking at so far today. But yeah, basically we have all these different sorting and display options that are available throughout BackOffice, some different controls that we can use to modify and configure our reports. The more familiar that you get with these things, the better you'll be able to not only obtain the data that you want more quickly, but also be in a position to interpret the data a bit more easily. In time, tools like report filters and adjusting views that we're about to cover now will become second nature to you. Alright, the first report option that we're going to talk about is one that is seen in almost all BackOffice reports, and that is the ability to filter a report to a specific something. Some of this may make a bit more sense once we get through some upcoming lessons, but depending on the report and its purpose, we could filter to a store, for example. If the organization has multiple stores, we could filter to a supplier if I find one that has that option. Cool. Once we have suppliers built in the database, we can filter to a supplier. If we go into a product-based one, maybe the product summaries, cool, we can see that we can filter to a product profile once we have some created in the database, and that may make more sense to you once we cover product profiles in an upcoming lesson. But regardless, we will have these filters throughout. Like I said, almost every report will have at least one, and they're going to be presented in these drop-down formats where we can select one from the drop-down to filter the report. Reason being is that we will not always want to view data for the entire database within a report. At times we might like to pinpoint or at best just narrow down what we're going to be looking at and what we're going to be analyzing. But yeah, like I said, majority of our BackOffice reports, probably 90% of them at least, will have some sort of filtering option. And along the same vein, some BackOffice reports have another option, like display by or like this group by option here, which can be used to help with analysis by combining more specific data sets within the one report. As an example here, we have open the product summaries report, so we could filter this to a specific store first. Again, if I did have multiple stores in this database, just imagine that I do, and we want to filter this report to just the one store. And then within the report itself, we could then use this group by filter to group the data by type group or something like that. And we could then see group totals and product totals within those groupings. Another useful tool, and probably the most common, is going to be the display period that I pointed out earlier, so that we can select the exact reporting period that we would like to view data for. By default, this is typically going to be set to current shift, like this one is here, when a report is first opened, but maybe we don't want to look at just that, at just the current shift. Maybe we want to see data for the current week, or maybe for the last shift, or maybe for the calendar year, or maybe we'd want to see even all time. Of course, that does obviously depend on what the goal is of running this report. Are we checking some daily figures? Are we seeing how the week is trending? Are we gathering end of year data? So on and so forth. Notice also at the bottom that we have this custom option. And what that is going to allow us to do is to select a specific date and shift from and to. So we could then use these little pop-outs here to select a specific date and use these drop-downs to select a shift. Of course, the shifts will be labeled as they're defined in the venue record, if you recall back to the system setup lesson when we went over shifts. I could have also, by the way, to access this option, rather than having the select by period radio button selected here, we could have just gone select by shift, and that will give us those options as well. But yeah, what this will do is just give us complete flexibility over the reporting period that we want to look at, from a specific date and shift to a specific date and shift, if none of those period options that are available here are suitable. As with the other filters, the period options are really integral for optimizing our reporting capabilities by simply being able to isolate the exact period of time that we want to analyze data for. Additionally, and similar to the group by option, some select reports will have an option called time span. What this selection will do is it's going to allow for reporting on a larger time period overall, but then within that report being able to see data for more specific, chunks of time within it, such as monthly totals or by specific day of the week. For example, we could run this report. Obviously, there's not going to be any data for this in here, but just for an example, we could run this report showing maybe all of last year, and then using the time span option, we could have it look at Saturdays only. Now again, obviously I'm not going to find any data in this database, but that's just an example of what we could use those options for and combine some of these filtering options for us. Aside from those options that can narrow down and filter all of the available data to more specific data sets, many reports have other options available to further customize and optimize our analysis abilities also. Some will be things like filtering to a product profile or an account profile if it's an account-based report. Some reports will have flags that can alter or enhance the visible data, like the few that we've got here. It all just depends on the report's purpose, but the bottom line is that we have options for optimization and analysis and filtering and configuration and customization and all those fun words that let us really tailor a report to our exact specifications. That's not to say that by all means our back office reports can be left to their defaults and they're still going to be great tools as is, but many of them can be adjusted and improved for some unique analysis and reporting capabilities. Your databases, like mine, probably don't have much data in them yet, but you should still be able to have a go at using these sorting and display options. And then in the future, when you do have some sales and stock data and things like that in your database, you'll be able to call on that skill to customize your reports when need be. But all of these report sorting and display options that we've looked at aren't going to do much good unless the data that we're actually looking at is relevant, and that is where views come into play. Now, I should clarify what a report view is. A report view is just the word used to refer to the collection of columns of data that are showing in a report at a given time. So we can see for this view that's selected here, the standard view of our product summaries report is going to show us data for a time span, product name, stock mode, size name, so on and so forth, and different views for this report will show us different columns of data. So the view selected ultimately just determines what information from the full data set available will be displayed for analysis or for other operational activities. Now I say other operational activities because views and some of the other report filter options that we've just seen also apply to things that we may not necessarily consider when we think of back-office reports. I mentioned this a bit earlier, but if I open the product list, you can see that this actually is a report. It's just a report showing our products that are in the database, and while there's no display period option for this because that's just not applicable, it does have the ability to filter some things, to adjust, and to change the viewable data, and we do have views in here as well. So each report, including, I'll just call them the maintenance lists because they're in the maintenance menu and they're lists of things, so they will all have at least one standard view, but some will have quite a few. If I open the view drop down for the product list, we can see there's a dozen or so here, and these can either be used as is, they can be copied and then edited to create a new view. These views themselves can be edited if we would like to change the data that's available within them, and we can also create brand new views from scratch if that's something that we'd like to do. I will actually use the product list to demonstrate this since as I've said and as you've seen, I only have minimal sales and stock data in this database, just from the sales that I've processed in other lessons, and I think there's some negative stock quantities due to those sales being processed and not actually having received any stock into this database. But anyway, to access and select any of the existing views for a report, we do just need to click this drop down, and which is next to this little views icon, by the way, and then we can select one of these different views from the list, or that was the same view. But if I tab down through these and select some different views from the list, just notice that each one is going to return a different set of data with the column headings indicating what that data is. So we can see that as I tab through these, that is all going to change. The names of the views are going to indicate their intended purpose or maybe summarize the type of data that each one is going to be presenting us. And by the way, I should mention this, each report does have its own available data set and therefore its own views, although some of the data that's available from report to report may be similar. Now, if we would like to add, edit, or delete any views for a report, basically to maintain the views, we do just need to click on this little views icon that's next to that drop down. That is going to open a separate views window where the views for this specific report can then be maintained. From this window, you'll notice that each view has an option to be protected, meaning that it can only be edited or deleted by a privileged operator. And each view can also have a filter pre-applied to the data that's going to be returned. We can limit a view to an operator or an operator group, and we can also have a description included. Now, as far as actually customizing these views and selecting the data from the datasets to determine the columns of data that are going to be returned, it isn't all that difficult once you get some practice with it and understand the options. We do have a button at the top you can see to add a new view from scratch, but it's probably going to be easier to demonstrate all of this by showing you one of these existing views, since the same principles will apply whether we're editing an existing view or if we're adding a new one. So if I have one of these highlighted, If we would like to edit one, we just click on the Edit Views button. That is going to open another window for us labeled View Maintenance, and from here we will be presented with all the individual columns that are available for the given report, in this case for the product list, in this section on the left. I mentioned this earlier, but worth repeating, each report will have different columns available to choose from because each one has different data sets attributed to it. For example, the columns that are available for the product list for this report here will be different from those that are available for, say, the transaction journal, and different from those that are available for, let's say, an account-based report. Of course, that's not to say that there won't be some crossover from report to report, because there certainly is. For some reports, like this one, you can see that this list is going to be very, very long, and it will take some time and some experimentation, I guess might be a good word for it, to sort of understand each one and what the benefits of them could be, and the differences between the data sets and the data that's available for each one. But pretty intuitive once we get into it. So the columns can be selected over here and then added or removed. You can see that anything that's currently selected to be shown in the view is going to show on the right side over here. There are also options for customizing the columns in a view, which we can see here, some customization options available. Depending on what the data column is, it might have totals available for it. So if I scroll down through this on the left, should get to some, there we go. We can see some that have this flag turned on for this totals column. Now this is not anything that we can edit. This is just showing us whether that bit of data can have totals for it, meaning that the product list in this example can report on that for each product. But also if we are, say, filtering or sorting the list by something like product sort or product type, we can see the totals of those for that thing. Now for a piece of data that does have totals available, that does have this flag turned on, we can then use this add percentage of total button to add the column that will then show a percentage of the total in this report, for example, for each product. We can also do things like we can choose if we'd like a column sorted either ascending or descending by default. We can choose to hide a column, which may be useful if we want to do something like keep it in the view but maybe only report on it sometimes and just manually hide and unhide it when we want to. We can choose to chart some data. More on that in a couple minutes. And we can also pin columns by default, meaning that the column itself will stay put when we're scrolling right. So if the report contains a lot of columns and we want to keep something like the product name on the left pinned down on the left side, we can do that, so that way that bit of data will stay in place for us. And lastly, we can enter some override text for a column if we would like it to be labeled something different aside from the default names that we can see here. But yeah, very quite customizable, user-friendly options here for editing and creating views. By the way, a couple other things I should mention. Firstly is that the views that are included with the software out of the box are going to be prefaced with an underscore like this one has got here. And a couple other things is that these are where we have the options to actually protect if we would like to, and where we can select the allowed operator or operator group if we would like to do that. This is related to that drop down at the operator record where we could determine what's going to be selected here by default when an operator creates a new view. Cool, well let me just remove that. And I'll just click cancel here actually, and I will just select a view here. So once we have our view edited however we'd like to have it, and we've got it selected, we can also use some other tools within the report to further enhance our analysis capabilities by being able to filter and sort the data that is returned when the report is run. So what I actually might do is, let me run one here. I'll just turn on subproducts there so we can actually see some things. And maybe I'll go back to, no, I'll just leave this one on. That should be fine. So once we've settled on a view, we then have some other tools that we can use within the report to filter things further and sort things and so forth. So this little funnel looking icon here is pretty much exactly what that is. It is a toggle for our filter that we can turn off and on. When we are filtering, that is going to enable some filtering for at the top of each column. We will then have a drop down that's going to be available with some associated options for us to be able to filter that column and therefore, filter the report overall. So if I go, that's probably a bad example there, but if I choose, let's say for size 1, we want to filter this report. So in this case, by the way, I've got the base product group showing and then sub products. So we're seeing all 179 products in this database in this report, but maybe we would like to filter that to only show products that have a size 1 that has been called bottle. Maybe then along with that, we would like to make this column either ascending or descending by price, or maybe we would like to have that be alphabetical. Additionally, you can see here where we can manually pin columns if we'd like to do that. Now this is not a good example here, but maybe if I minimize this window, make this even smaller, I can show you. So if we have this product name pinned down here, we will then be able to scroll, and as I scroll to the right, that column is going to stay in place there for us. Cool, now like I said, this is a pretty basic example that we've seen here. Keep in mind also that this is not a full-fledged report here, but it's our product list, but it is still a report in itself. So like I said, I've got this view, in this case, showing our entire product list, but it's been filtered using these filters in this view, which is showing us information for price number 1. So basically for price number 1 here, we are seeing each size name if they're defined. If not, they're just blank. And for those sizes, we're able to see the selling prices for those if they're defined. If not, those are just going to show a 0. But yeah, like I said, pretty basic example here that we've been able to filter and sort. But you can see quite the powerful options, I'll say, that we can use once we've got a report opened and we're using a view that we'd like to use and possibly have this filtered and sorted using some options from the top. And once you get the hang of views and our filters, they really will take your reporting and data analysis powers to the next level, believe me. And speaking of next level, something that I skimmed over earlier, and this also ties back to the BI and big data topic from the beginning of the lesson, is that we do have the ability to take report data and turn it into visual charts and graphs. These will not be quite as robust as a Power BI or Infragistics will be by any means, but still a rudimentary yet useful tool for us. Most reports will have some data that can be charted by default, but to turn this off or on for a data column, we do have a charting flag that I showed earlier within the view maintenance. If none of the columns for a report are marked for charting and we try to chart the report, we are going to be notified as such. In that case, we can then of course edit the view and we can mark the columns that we would like to chart. I've got a little GIF playing here that's going to show us that. Something to keep in mind though is that even though we can mark a column for charting, if I can get that to come up, there we go. So even if we can mark a column for charting, if we then go on to select the wrong type of chart, it might not make any sense for us. So we just need to take that into consideration. In this example that I'm showing here, the line chart or area chart probably would make the most sense, but the cylinder bar chart is kind of difficult to read, and the pie chart just doesn't even really make sense when we're looking at, in this case, operators' average sales. If I run that again, we can see those differences. By the way, we are looking at a different database here that does have some chartable data, since the one obviously that I've been building in this course does not have much data to chart just yet, but we can see some different options for our charts there. Also, keep in mind that it is best to limit, in my experience, it is best to limit the columns being charted at any given time to 3 or less, especially for instances where there are a lot of rows in the report grid. The more rows that are being charted, the muddier the chart can start to look, and with more than 2 or 3 columns selected for charting, it can actually make the charts almost unreadable. Of course, it does depend on the chart type that's going to be used. For something like a line chart or an area chart like we have here, 2 columns really is ideal. So that way we've got one data set for the x-axis and one for the y-axis, not the 4 columns being charted in this example. We've got product names on the x-axis at the bottom, and then we've got units sold, net total, and profit amount all being graphed and sort of stacked on top of each other here. If we can see, we can refer to the legend over here on the right, and we can kind of see those, but not really, because like I said, they are just sort of stacked and squashed on top of each other. Not really easy to read or to make good use of this chart. So one last note on choosing the columns to be charted is just that a little bit of common sense goes a long way. To make sure that a chart is going to be at least somewhat effective, just be sure to select something like the product name or another category or group, obviously depending on the report view and depending on the report itself, as one of the data points that are being charted. And I realize that I've been showing these charts but haven't yet showed you how to create them. So the Chart It button is going to sit at the top in the header ribbon of most reports, and it is what needs to be used, and will do exactly that, provided that there are at least 2 columns in the view that are configured for charting. So clicking that is going to bring up a chart section in a separate window beneath the report itself, where we can then select the actual type of chart that we'd like to put that data into. We do also have options for showing a legend, or we can turn that off if we'd like to, and we can swap rows and columns for a different visualization if we need to, but we can sort of trial and error those things out and see what works best, as well as selecting which type of chart might work best with the data that's available for us. Because as mentioned earlier, the type of chart being used is as important as the data being analyzed, because of course, like any tool, the charting feature can be used correctly or it can be used incorrectly. The best chart type will ultimately depend on the individual report and the data columns that are being charted. As we saw in that example earlier, not all chart types will work for all reports and all report data. It may just take some trial and error to determine the right chart for the report. And one final little tidbit before we finish up is that charting reports is not limited to single reporting periods. Just as we can compare 2 periods on certain reports, actually didn't show that earlier, but there are some reports that we can report on and compare 2 periods. We can also chart those periods easily if we would like to do something like compare trends. So if I play this here, if we take the Till Summaries report, for example here, we've got a view set up here to compare net total, profit amount, and profit percent of 2 periods, and it is going to, that stopped playing, and it is going to chart the 2 periods profit percentages. So we can then set the reporting periods to look at something like the current year and then maybe last year partial, and then to optimize our data analysis, we can then chart those. So in this example here, we are reporting on 2 separate periods, and then we can chart the 2 separate periods there. Not only that, but if we do print a report that has been charted, There we go. If we print a report that's been charted, the chart is going to print with it also. Cool, well that is going to do it for this lesson covering all things back office data admin related, from the importance of quality data to where to locate certain reports and how to then use reporting controls to configure them, to seeing how views can be maintained and then filtered, to how to chart report data. I do strongly encourage you to have a go with all of that in your own databases, even if, you know, as I don't here, even if you don't have a lot of data in yours just yet, you should still be able to get some practice in for now. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching and see you soon.